I was pulling up the floorboard to check for water damage. That's all. Just a creaky board in an old house that needed fixing before I returned the keys to the real estate agent. But when I lifted the plank, what I saw didn't look like rot or mold. It looked like bundles of cash. Neatly stacked. Rubber-banded. Dusty but untouched. My hand was shaking when I reached in and pulled one out. Then another. And another. All hundreds. And beneath them, tucked flat, with handwriting I knew by heart, was a letter. A letter addressed to me. From Estelle. The woman the world believed hated me. The woman I took care of for 10 years, after her son, my ex-husband, left me and never looked back. The woman whose own daughters never lifted a finger for her. The woman I sat beside for every meal, bathed, comforted through tears, and carried up the stairs when she couldn't walk. I sank to the floor, heart racing, fingers trembling as I unfolded the paper. Her cursive was shaky, but unmistakable. And as I read the first line, something inside me cracked open. Clara, if you're reading this, I'm no longer here. But before I go, there are things I need you to know. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I sat on the hardwood floor for what felt like hours, the letter gripped tightly in my hands. My eyes kept darting between the paper and the bundles of money beside me. I read the letter again, slower this time, letting each word sink into the cracks left behind by years of exhaustion and quiet resentment. I never said it out loud, Estelle had written, but I saw you. I saw the way you cared for me, not out of duty, but from a place deeper than most people can ever reach. My own children stopped seeing me as a person a long time ago. But you never did. She went on to describe how she had set the money aside over the years. Little by little. Quietly. Secretly. Birthday checks she never cashed. Payouts from insurance policies. Pieces of jewelry sold off one by one. I knew one day I would be gone, she wrote. And I knew they'd never give you what you deserved. The final paragraph was scrawled, as though written in a rush, don't tell them. Not a cent. Not a word. Let them fight over the crumbs. This is for you, Clara. For the quiet years. For the pain you never spoke. For the way you made me feel human when no one else did. By the time I folded the letter and placed it gently back in the envelope, I was crying. Not the loud kind. Not the theatrical sobs Lauren always performed when a camera or a stranger was near. These were quiet tears. Heavy. Rooted in something that had been buried for too long. I stood slowly, legs numb. I opened the hallway closet and pulled out the lockbox I kept under a stack of old blankets. I placed the money inside, then the letter, and closed it tight. That night, as I sat across from my son Elijah at the dinner table, I found myself studying him in a way I hadn't in years. He was taller now, more serious. The kind of serious that children take on too early when they've watched their mother carry too much alone. He looked up from his plate. You okay, Mom? I smiled, one of those small ones that only just reach the eyes. I think so, I said. I think things are finally going to change. And for the first time in years, I actually meant it. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the kitchen window like nothing had changed. The kettle whistled, the toast popped, and Elijah rushed around trying to find his left sneaker. But everything had changed. I moved through the house with a sense of awareness I hadn't felt in years. Every creak of the old floorboards under my feet, every photo frame on the mantel, every coffee cup with Estelle's lipstick stains still faint on the rim, it all felt sharper, like I was finally waking up from something. After I dropped Elijah off at school, I drove to the bank. My palms were sweating against the steering wheel the whole ride there. I divided the money into 2 separate envelopes, just like Estelle had advised in her letter's postscript. Spread it out, she'd written, so they can't ever trace it. I walked into the bank and opened a new account under my maiden name, Clara Whitmore. It felt strange, even a little rebellious. I hadn't used that name since I was 21, but something about it felt safe. Like claiming a version of myself I'd left behind when I married into the Delaney family. The teller smiled at me as she handed back my paperwork. "Starting something new?" she asked, innocently. I gave her a small nod. "Yeah," I said. "You could say that." That evening, after dinner, I called my mother. She still lived in the same little house outside of Savannah. We hadn't talked much in recent years, not because of any big falling out, but because somewhere along the line, I started believing I needed to handle everything on my own. She answered on the second ring. "Clara?" "Hi, Mom." My voice cracked, and I didn't know why. "Is Elijah okay?" "He's fine," I said quickly. "Actually, he's great. I found something. Something Estelle left me. And I think I'm going to be okay now." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, quietly, "Baby, you've always been stronger than they gave you credit for." That night, I slept without waking up once. But just 2 days later, I started noticing it. The way Lauren's texts suddenly became frequent again, sugary sweet. The missed calls from Brad. The knock at the door at 7:15 a.m. from Chad's lawyer, pretending it was about a property valuation. They knew. Somehow, they knew. The morning they showed up at my front door, I was making pancakes. Elijah sat at the table in his Spider-Man pajamas, chattering about a science project while syrup dripped down his fork. The house smelled like vanilla and browned butter, the kind of morning I used to dream about when life was darker, heavier. Then the knock came. Sharp. Rhythmic. The kind of knock that didn't ask for permission, it demanded attention. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door. There they were. Lauren, in a stiff beige blazer and sunglasses too large for her narrow face. Beside her, Brad, arms crossed, jaw clenched. And behind them, Chad. I hadn't seen him in over 2 years. Not since he signed the divorce papers with the ink still smudged from last night's whiskey. Now he stood there with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Kylie," Lauren said, her voice syrupy. "We were just in the neighborhood and thought we'd check in. See how you're doing after everything." My stomach tightened. "Everything like your mother's funeral? Or the way you all tried to push me out of the house before she was even buried?" Chad took a step forward. "Can we come in?" "No." There was silence. Elijah peeked around the corner, but I gently motioned for him to go back to the kitchen. Lauren sighed, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Look, we know Mom left you the house. It was her choice, fine. But, some things have come to our attention." Brad spoke up, his voice low. "We know about the money." I didn't react. I couldn't. Inside, my heart started hammering, but I kept my face still. "What money?" "The money she stashed in the floorboards," Lauren said. "You think we don't know? You think she'd leave that kind of cash lying around and not tell anyone?" "She didn't tell you," I said slowly. "Maybe there's a reason for that." Chad's smile dropped. "Don't play dumb. That money belonged to her. And if she didn't mention it in the will, then legally." "It belonged to me," I interrupted. "She wrote me a letter. With her own hand. You all remember that, right?" She could still write. Barely, but clearly enough to say exactly what she wanted. Lauren stepped forward. "Handwriting can be forged. I'm sure a court would find it interesting." I looked her in the eyes. "So take it to court. Go ahead. Drag your mother's memory through legal mud over money she chose not to leave to any of you." The words hung between us. Then Chad leaned in, dropping the nice guy act. His voice turned cold. "We're not here to argue. We're here to warn you. You've got a kid. Think carefully about the kind of trouble you want to bring into his life." And that's when I understood this wasn't about money. Not really. It was about control. About power. About a family that couldn't stand to see someone like me win, even after everything they'd taken. I stepped back, kept the door half open. You've made your position clear. Now here's mine, stay away from me and my son. If I see any of you near this house again, I'll make sure the police know about every threat, every visit, every little word you just said. I closed the door. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt furious. I felt ready. 3 days later, the lights went out at 11:47 p.m. I was in bed, reading over Elijah's homework folder for the week, when the house went black. At first, I thought it was just a blown fuse. But when I peeked out the window and saw that the houses down the street were still glowing, a chill crept up my spine. It wasn't a power outage. I grabbed my phone. No signal. I walked quietly into Elijah's room. He was fast asleep, his little chest rising and falling under his dinosaur blanket. I closed the door behind me and reached under the sink in the kitchen, pulling out the pepper spray and the small flashlight I kept hidden in an old coffee can. A habit from before, from the days when I knew how fast the world could turn on a woman alone. The backyard motion sensor light flickered on. Someone was out there. I froze in the hallway. Then, carefully, I moved to the side window and peeked through the blinds. Chad. He was standing in the yard, hands in his pockets, head tilted back as if admiring the house. Like he belonged there. He didn't knock this time. I waited in silence, my fingers clenched around the pepper spray, my breath shallow. I watched as he paced the yard for a few minutes, then disappeared behind the garage. It wasn't until morning that I discovered the back gate had been unlatched. I reported it to the police. They took a statement, nodded, told me they'd look into it. But the way the officer looked at me, like I was overreacting, like maybe I was imagining things, it made my skin crawl. The next day, a note was left in my mailbox. No envelope, no name. If you think this is over, think again. You weren't blood. You were a mistake. I sat on the porch steps, clutching the note, the words pulsing like poison in my hands. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It wasn't even about Marie's will. It was about erasing me. As if 10 years of loyalty, 10 years of feeding, bathing, and comforting their mother had meant nothing because I wasn't blood. But they had underestimated one thing. I had spent a decade in silence. In service. In invisibility. And I had learned more about these people than they realized. Their habits, their secrets, the fragile threads holding up their lives. They thought I was a shadow they could chase away. They didn't know I had already started building a fortress, with walls made of names, accounts, hidden recordings, and copies of Marie's letter in 3 different safe places. They thought they were circling a wounded bird. But I had grown claws. The next week, I stayed alert, sleepless nights, double-checking locks, walking Elijah to and from school myself. I canceled my weekend shifts at the clinic and moved our savings to a new bank under a trust account. Quietly. Methodically. Then one night, as I was washing dishes after dinner, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to pick up. Ms. Harper? A clipped, formal voice asked. This is Douglas Yates from Kensington First Bank. I'm calling regarding an attempted inquiry on your son Elijah's trust account. The individual identified himself as Chad Harper, claimed he was the biological father and legal guardian. My blood ran cold. I assume, Mr. Yates continued, this is not something you authorized? No, I said calmly. It is not. And he's neither legal guardian nor has he had custody in nearly 7 years. I have the court documents if you need them. There was a pause. Thank you, Ms. Harper. We've flagged the attempt and will take further security measures on the account. I hung up and sat at the table in the dim kitchen light, every muscle in my body tense. He was getting desperate. Trying to get to Elijah through the only leverage he thought he had left, money. That night, I pulled out the envelope labeled contingency, the one I had hidden in the crawl space for months. Inside was everything I had compiled over the last year. Receipts. Texts. A copy of Marie's handwritten will she never filed but left in her jewelry box, which named me as the beneficiary of her personal savings kept within the home. Recordings of Brad threatening me. A transcript of the conversation I had overheard between Lauren and Chad in that dingy diner, where they laughed about how easy it would be to guilt-trip me through Elijah. I even had footage from James' security camera outside his store. The night Brad and Tessa tried to trap me and my son. Every time they underestimated me, I made a note. Every time they threatened, I kept a record. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was protection. Safety. But protection, I realized, would only come if I took control of the narrative. So I made an appointment with my attorney. Not just to strengthen Elijah's trust, or to put a restraining order in place, but to initiate something bigger. Something that would drag every skeleton out of their closets, and into the light. 3 days later, I walked into my attorney's office with a leather folder pressed tightly to my chest. Melissa Wynn, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 40s with a reputation for tearing apart dishonest families in probate court, looked up from her desk and smiled. I was wondering when you'd come in. I sat down, handed her the folder. I need to do this the right way. She opened it and flipped through each piece: Marie's letter, the photos of the hidden money, the will written in her handwriting, the flagged bank attempt, the security footage, the voice memos. Her brow arched as she read. Your mother-in-law tried to do the right thing. Her children, on the other hand, Melissa trailed off. This is more than enough. It's airtight. And I assume you're not looking for a quiet resolution? No, I said. I'm done being quiet. Melissa leaned back, thoughtful. We can petition to honor Marie's intent through a trust claim. If it goes to court, we can subpoena the video and phone records, show the attempted financial manipulation, and the physical threats. It might open a fraud investigation into Brad's prior real estate deals too, if we connect the dots. Good, I said, not flinching. Let's connect them. 2 weeks passed. The legal filings were served. Quiet whispers in town turned into murmurs. Then murmurs became gasps. The Harper children, once smug in their privilege, now found themselves at the center of a legal scandal. The town library newsletter ran an article titled "Caretaker Turns Tables on Local Real Estate Heir." I didn't ask for that headline, but I didn't mind it either. Brad tried to file a counterclaim for the funds under undue influence. It was quickly thrown out when Melissa produced evidence of him threatening me, and photos of the bruises on Marie's arm from the year before. Lauren went silent, pulling out of the community board and her Pilates group. The facade of the perfect daughter cracked wide open when her private messages leaked, some of which mocked Marie in her final months. Messages she'd sent to Tessa. As for Chad? He showed up at my door again, alone this time. Can we talk? No, I replied. He tried to look remorseful. Look, I was stupid. I know that. But maybe we could start over. You mean, you could use Elijah to get close to the trust fund again? I asked, stepping outside and closing the door behind me. He looked stunned. What? I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply handed him a sealed envelope. Inside was a restraining order. Melissa had it expedited. Stay away from me. From my son. From our lives. He stared down at the paper, then back at me. You've changed. No, I said softly. You never knew me to begin with. He walked away. And I closed the door, this time, for good. That fall, I bought a small house just outside town. Nothing grand, 2 bedrooms, a porch that creaked when you stepped on the 3rd plank, and a patch of garden that hadn't seen love in years. But it was mine. Fully mine. I painted the kitchen a warm sage green, the same shade Marie once used in her breakfast nook. I planted lavender along the fence because Elijah said it smelled like Grandma's smile. I wasn't rich, but I was free. The legal process ended quietly after that. Melissa called me one morning to say the judge had ruled in our favor. Marie's handwritten letter had been upheld. The trust had been finalized. The $300,000? Securely in a fund for Elijah's education and our future. There would be no more threats. No more Brad, or Lauren, or Chad showing up in the shadows of our lives. Elijah adjusted faster than I expected. He started middle school that winter and took to drawing comic strips, ones where the mom always saved the day, and the villains wore expensive suits and got stuck in dumpsters. I never asked, but I had a pretty good idea where his inspiration came from. One night, after dinner, he curled up beside me on the couch, looked up, and asked, "Mom? Did Grandma Marie know what was going to happen?" I paused. Thought about the way she'd squeezed my hand the night before she died. The extra slice of pie she asked for. The glimmer of peace in her eyes, like she had made her choice. "I think she did," I said softly. "I think she knew everything. And she wanted to make sure we were okay." He nodded, satisfied. And for the first time in over a decade, so was I. I had spent 10 years unseen, unheard, undervalued. But in the end, the one voice that truly mattered, the one that had been silenced, had spoken loudest of all. Marie gave me more than money. She gave me back my worth. She gave me the power to choose my life. And I chose peace. Winter arrived with a quiet grace. Snow dusted the porch railings, and the lavender bushes stood bare, but stubborn, in the cold earth. Each morning, Elijah and I walked to the corner bakery for hot cocoa, our new little tradition. The owner, Mrs. Ramos, always gave him extra marshmallows. She said he reminded her of her grandson. One Saturday, we were browsing books at the town library when I saw a familiar figure, Melissa, my lawyer, in jeans and a puffy green coat, pushing a stroller with a sleepy baby inside. We exchanged warm smiles, and she pulled me aside. "There's a scholarship fund being started in Marie's name," she said, her voice low but excited. "Anonymous donation, of course, but I had a feeling you'd want to know." I swallowed hard. "Thank you for telling me." Marie's legacy was living on, not through her children, but through quiet acts of kindness and second chances. Back home, I sat on the back steps while Elijah ran circles in the snow, his laughter ringing like wind chimes. I held a mug of peppermint tea between my palms and looked out over the field behind our house. The old oak tree stood tall there, naked in winter but strong. Just like I felt. Later that night, I opened a small wooden box I kept hidden in the back of my closet. Inside were the letters Marie had written over the years, birthday notes, grocery lists, old recipes in her delicate cursive. And at the very bottom, the letter she left with the money. I read it again, as I had many times before. "Kara. If you're reading this, it means I've gone, and you stayed. Thank you. This money is not a reward, it's a recognition. You gave me dignity when others gave me excuses. You saw me when I was no longer able to speak. You loved me when it cost you time, freedom, and comfort. I may not be here anymore, but your life is just beginning. Take it. Live it. All of it." I didn't cry this time. I smiled. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't surviving. I was thriving. Spring arrived like a whisper, first in the form of yellow crocuses peeking through the soil, then in the soft warmth of sunlight on my kitchen tiles. Life had slowed, but in all the right ways. On a breezy afternoon, I was setting up a booth at the local community fair. It was my first time offering home health workshops, basic caregiving tips for families, how to support elderly relatives with dignity, and, surprisingly, how to advocate for oneself in a family that doesn't always listen. To my surprise, the tent was full. People asked questions. They took notes. Some shared their own stories of being the invisible caregiver, the one who sacrificed while others disappeared. And then, just before the event ended, a familiar voice spoke behind me. "I heard you've been busy changing the world, Kara." I turned slowly. Chad stood there, older, thinner, his hands shoved into his jacket pockets. I didn't flinch. You missed your chance, I said softly. You missed all the chances. He nodded. I know. There was no shouting. No drama. Just truth. He looked at Elijah, who was helping another kid hang birdhouses on a tree. He looks happy. He is, I said. And I am, too. Chad hesitated. Do you think, maybe someday? No, I interrupted gently. Some doors stay closed. This is one of them. He didn't argue. He just gave a small nod and walked away, blending into the crowd. That night, Elijah crawled into bed beside me with a book about constellations. Mom, do you think stars remember where they came from? I smiled. Maybe. But I think they shine brightest when they know where they're going. He nodded thoughtfully and rested his head on my shoulder. And as I turned off the light, I realized something. This wasn't just the end of a long, painful chapter. It was the beginning of my own story, written not in the shadows of what others did to me, but in the light of what I had done for myself. I was no longer the forgotten daughter-in-law. No longer the backup plan, the silent caretaker, the woman waiting for someone to come home. I was Kara. Whole. Standing. Alive. And that, finally, was enough. What you just heard isn't just a story about money or betrayal, it's a reminder that sometimes, the people we least expect hold the deepest truth in their hearts. Kara wasn't seen. She wasn't valued. But in the end, she claimed more than money, she claimed her power. What did this story make you feel? Do you think Kara was right to keep the money? Tell us in the comments, press 2 if you were rooting for her, and 7 if you think it was too much. And if you want more real stories of strength, betrayal, and justice, hit that subscribe button. Because the next story might just be the one you need to hear most. Stay tuned, we're only getting started.